It's Wednesday evening, the 16th of June, and this is the Tirconaill Tribune podcast from Milford with me, John McAteer, and Eamon McFadden. And we're going to cast an eye back over the events of this week. And the main event nationally as well as locally has been the Mica demonstration in Dublin. We're covering that in great detail across 4 pages. Our top story is the clock now ticking to resolve the Mica crisis. We follow that inside the paper with counting the cost of Mica, and also Mica campaign finally hits home. We're going to return to those stories, but first of all we're going to other news, and we have a story here about a former priest on trial on sex abuse allegations. A former priest is to stand trial in the Circuit Court on 26 counts of indecent assault on 2 young girls almost 50 years ago. The charges relate to periods between 1972 and 1975, and the former priest appeared at Letterkenny District Court on Monday, where a book of evidence was served against him, and he cannot be named for legal reasons in order to protect the identity of the alleged victims. But Judge Alan Mitchell granted legal aid to solicitor Frank Dorian, and 2 legal counsel were assigned. The man who was remanded on continuing bail is to be of good behaviour and is to notify Gardaí of any change of address, and is due to appear at the Circuit Court, which commences its July session on the 13th. We'll go from that. We'll take a look at Ballyness Bay. We understand there's some development there.
The Ballyness Bay issue has been going on for some time, following the awarding of some aquaculture licences there in recent years. That was met with quite a contentious issue in the community down there, and the Save Ballyness Bay group were up and running with that there as well. There has been a number of these licences awarded, but they brought an appeal to the Aquaculture Licence Appeals Board. Now that was due to have been sort of heard and determined by the summer, by the end of the month, actually June 30th is what they're saying. But they have written to us to inform that they have the appeal has now been postponed and it's going to be pushed back, and it would appear it's been pushed back to the very end of December of this year. So what they're saying is that the Aquaculture Licence Appeals Board, this is what they have sent on to say: it will not be in a position to determine this appeal by the 30th of June 2021 due to the complexity of the matter which required to be determined as part of this appeal. The board hereby gives notice of its intention to determine the appeal by the 31st of December 2021. So New Year's Eve would appear to be the date for that, which is quite an unusual sort of time.
We're looking at licensing here for a substantive area of ground, and local oystermen who have fished this traditionally for generations are no longer allowed to fish, are they? Or to engage in any activities in the bay. Is that correct?
That's the licensing was made available. Initially there was 18 applications for that, from what I understand. There was 14 of those awarded. Primarily all of those, even though there had been interest from outside of the county, and maybe more sort of large scale companies, but there's 14 of those licenses and they've been granted within Donegal. As you say, traditionally that area would have been oyster farmed anyway, but this is sort of, I suppose, how would you say, an updated version of all of that, and this would be...
But it would have been farmed on a relatively small organic type scale, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
And those fishermen are now not allowed to do that in the meantime.
Yeah, as far as I understand it as well. So the licenses are there now. Whether any of those former traditional oyster fishermen applied for these new licenses, it's hard to determine. But the licenses are there, they've been granted, and that's the thing.
But there's nothing operational at this point, because
I think the appeals process will be seen.
The appeals process is ongoing, and it'll go on to another year.
Appeals, December 31st. Whether that's a statutory thing, I'm not sure, but that's quite an unusual date to be given, to be having to determine that there. But we'll have to keep an eye on that. I certainly know that group are fully engaged with that process. So
right, we'll move on. Ramelton Community Hospital. Significant occasion in Ramelton Community Hospital.
Coming up next week.
The Ramelton Community Hospital, or the nursing unit as we have come to know it down the years affectionately, is 40 years open from next week. Now, the the plans to mark the occasion have been put on hold because of COVID restrictions still been there. But this place has been at the very heart of the community, right across the whole Mulford electoral area. And the level of nursing care there has been testament to the skills and all of the staff who work there as well. The fact that it's in operation for 4 decades speaks volumes. And I remember well being at the official opening of it in 1981. I was still working for the North Western Health Board. And I suppose all you can see is that we're just recording the fact that it is marking that birthday. But along with that, a number of staff, 3 of the original members of staff on the first day are still employed there. They are Bernadette Shields, Claire Durning and Mary Angela Merritt, and they have contributed greatly to the service provided to patients and residents over all those years. So regardless of celebrations, happy birthday to all of you and well done.
So I will follow on from that with there's a major new role for Amy Beth McNulty. Amy Beth McNulty from Milford. I suppose many people describe her now in the media as an Irish Canadian actress, but most people will know her from being here from Milford here. She had great success in recent years with a big production on Netflix called Anne with an E, and that's
right, yeah.
For 3 seasons she played the role of Anne Shirley Cuthbert on that, and that was a big popular Netflix series based on the famous Anne of Green Gables stage play, and she now has got a new role and probably an even bigger Netflix production again now. This is very popular, particularly among younger people. It's called Stranger Things. It's kind of almost like a science fiction style series, and it's grown in popularity as it's gone on, and that is now about to enter its 4th season, and she has been unveiled as one of the new cast members that's going to join that. So I would say that'll only help her elevate her name big time now in the United States, because that's
everything
major.
now is on Netflix, really, isn't it?
It is. If you're not landing a big role in Netflix, the movies aren't maybe as powerful as the ones
if
where
you're not watching Netflix, you're a stranger on the shore.
Stranger Things could have happened at Milford.
We just left to watch the Euros instead.
The Euros and the Eurovision.
But we'll move on because it's also a time to look back to 20 years ago. A feature that has become very, very relevant in the Tribune as people look back, and I was almost stunned to look at this lovely picture of 40 children and their teacher down at Port Salon at Croris National School. Their teacher, Helen Sweeney, and there was also Marie Call, Margaret Duffy and Lisa Hemstra, the classroom assistant, also in that picture. But what caused me to look at it a second time, there are 40 children in that school, right in the heart of Port Salon. Today it's under 10, significantly under 10.
Yeah.
So effectively, the population of that school has dropped by over 90%.
That is unbelievable
absolutely
statistic.
Shocking and incredible. But if you live down there, you sort of feel it and grasp it. The rural depopulation along that seaboard is the most prevalent issue here, and we're doing nothing to address that. But that wasn't really what I came on to talk about here. From Carrickmore to Carrigart on the night that Pat Doherty became an MP for West Tyrone and came back to Donegal, one of the biggest nights seen in celebration across the county. Indeed, half of West Tyrone were there as well, from Mahayarn up to Loch McCrory, Dromore, Trillick, Carrickmore and the villages in between. Plumbridge and then to Gortnabrad, of course, and Carrigart. And there's this beautiful picture of Pat being carried across the border on that Saturday night. The first time since 1918 that a Donegal man was elected in a Westminster election. Very historic and very relevant. But he's carried shoulder high by Eamon O'Boyle, Martin Brogan, Tom Dignam and his daughter Maria, who has also a big interest in politics to this very day. But that was a big occasion, and at that time there was a lot of Garda surveillance right around the place on the night in question, and there was only a limited number of people allowed into the venue, which was the old North Star in Carrigart.
The credit union is now.
Amid allegations that there was going to be a meeting of the IRA Army Council, which I've never had either confirmed or denied. But anyway, that was a really big occasion. The Doherty election machine report often resembled the Dublin campaigns of the 70s, and especially Carl Ulster in 1979, with hundreds of ordinary folk joined the battle, and it seemed every young one had suddenly come to know what with people power they could achieve, a goal that only a short few years ago was a pipe dream. So that is our look back at that historic period.
Good article to look back on.
Great times. There were some big homecomings with Pat Doherty. Big memories. It's hard to believe it's all 20 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah. Unbelievable.
From that we move on to the front page probably, and indeed to the...
Well, just maybe
Sorry.
We'll gloss on to a couple of those deaths, because there's a couple of deaths to note that people we knew very well here, I suppose, in the Tribune. And that there would be, the first one we'll cover would be respected academically, and that was Dr. Lawrence Smith, known to many as Larry Smith, down in Killalt in Falkirk. He was an engineer and a metalwork teacher down at PCC for almost 40 years. But he was one of these highly intelligent, very enthusiastic educators, but he had a great deal of interest in things outside of that as well. There was a lot of people lamented his sad passing there at the weekend. Larry was a kind of I suppose, as well as the school, he really helped to innovate education down there. And a testament to his own, suppose, abilities was that he was awarded a PhD back in, I think it was back in the early 90s. So he was very keen on his own personal development. But in his retirement from the school days, he went on to play a major role in a new hobby he took up, which was sort of show jumping, which at age 66 was the first time apparently he stood on a horse. And like all things Larry could do, he could do them very well within a very short space of time. And his yard down there became a real epicentre for all that, as a founding member of the Donegal Gaeltacht Riding Club, which has drawn a great amount of members and has represented the county very well.
We'll move on then and look at another legendary figure, really, that Brian McKinley. You have written that as well.
That's wee Brian. That's Main Street, Dunfanaghy. Brian was just a very, very well-known figure. He was an electrician for a lot of his life, came from a well-known family, but you couldn't really think of Brian without ever thinking of St Michael's. He was just steeped in that club, and I don't think there's hardly anybody that would have walked the sideline more of that ground than Brian, from all the underage work he did in the development. And the testament being to that in years later, after a long time before, after he'd started coaching all them younger ones, we had a whole raft come through that ended up winning all Irelands and all of that, and he's brought the club on a great deal. So wee Brian will be sadly missed now, definitely.
So that takes us back to our main headlines, and that is the Mica Redress, and we're just going to take an in-depth look at some of the things that's been going on here. Our lead story, I suppose, sets the tone for that, in that clock already ticking to fix Mica crisis. They have 6 weeks until the 31st of July. It's a very ambitious target, given that it's 20 years since this thing first surfaced, I would imagine. And doing research on all of this over the last number of months, you go back and you see on YouTube a very major report by Primetime Investigators and RTE back on Tuesday the 31st of May in 2016. The researchers had spent months coming and going to Donegal. It had been in the local media. The grassroots, not the grassroots, but the homeowners and their supporters had been campaigning for several years before the RTE investigation team came to Donegal. But they did come and they did do a very, very good job of it. And I was just wondering on yesterday afternoon in the Dáil, when Thomas Pringle was raising this and asking various questions about this, Neil Martin seemed to be at a loss as to why it wasn't an issue before now. But actually it was an issue long before now. And I mean, if he has time to sit down and watch that recording on YouTube, which I'm sure he'll be reminded about, he will see that it was a huge issue. And some of the main players there, like Eileen Owens and Anne Owens and Eileen Doherty, were very relevant players then. Right now, Paddy Dover has come in to light a new fire under that campaign.
Now,
And the hope and the aspiration is that fire will not go out until they get 100% redress. And we are writing across the front page on several thousand words. The massive support base that has built up in recent months has been driven by one man who came along to fill the political vacuum of a very long decade of failure. Paddy Diver's honesty and leadership has been the inspiration that has welded public support into political action, and the presence of the leader of the country in Donegal last Thursday afternoon spoke volumes of the acute pressures mounting behind the scenes. And you see, there is this political dimension.
Yeah.
You know, it's not overshadowing it, but it's there in the background, because until the kind of demonstration that took place in Dublin is followed up by government action. I mean, yesterday from midday until midnight in the early hours of this Wednesday morning, it was the number one issue that was trending. It was the number one issue on RTE across all their news platforms. It takes a lot of effort to get that there, but it was the sheer volume and the strength and the sheer colour and the determination of those who made the journey to Dublin. Given that we're still affected by COVID regulations, you know, many people wouldn't have gone. But what has been emerging ever since the two marches in Buncrana and Letterkenny is that more and more people who had never spoken about Mica have come out very openly to say their houses are very, very severely affected.
Yeah.
That is one story. You have also been looking at counting the cost of it.
Aye, trying to count the cost of it.
We're trying to find. In the meantime, we're looking at some of the photographs. We see Chris Duddy here being interviewed by Gareth Wilkinson up for UTV. Deputy Joe McHugh is there with Mica supporters in Dublin. Councillor Michael McBride with the group from Churchill and Kilmacrenan. We also have the Farron and Greer families locally here to the Mulford area, and of course we have members of the Rye community pictured in the sunshine, enjoying their fry-ups.
Yes,
on the way home. But you were
looking at the kind of the cost of that.
Yeah.
And as we can see, initially the families were offered 70% of the cost of it. That was at present it stands at 90%. Obviously they're seeking 100% redress, but there's many saying that they're going to be left with bills of over 100,000 personal bills on top of everything to help to address this issue. And some of those cases, that'll be on top of the current borrowings. They're paying off the mortgage for the old house that's crumbling around them anyway. Like those mortgages in many cases are not cleared.
Some of them it'll take years, because we're talking here about relatively young families, early teens, even younger, even 3 and 4 families, not even 10 years of age.
Yeah, that's it. And
those families are, they're pinned to their colour to pay their mortgage.
Are paying education costs for like maybe teenagers or something, going to college and all that. As one person put it, and actually wrote at the bottom, our family home is soon to be demolished. Mortgage payments continue. College fees are due. Our children have been robbed of their safe place. So that's someone who's going to have to demolish their house, rebuild the house. There's a lot of cost within that is not being met as is proposed here. You don't have architectural costs, you don't have planning costs, you don't have environmental reports, engineers reports. There's a lot of that stuff. The cost of building itself has gone up dramatically.
One of the issues that was raised with me was by an engineer who has a special interest in it, because he has an issue in his own home. And it is this here. What about the cost of removing the infected debris of the house?
The disposal of the waste material
has
to be done specialised, I would imagine.
We've got no real answers to that as yet.
No, but there's a lot to be threshed out.
But there'll
be a cost associated with
whatever
all that.
is wrong with the government of whatever hue they might be, there always seems to be an issue around housing. Let it be fire safety regulations, let it be what happened in Priory Hall that time. Joe McHugh on the first day he became Minister for Education was landed with a huge problem about schools, which I'm sure the repairs to that or the restoration of the
public buildings as well.
Those buildings is still ongoing. And now we had pyrite and we had mica, and there are comparisons, because I remember the pyrite thing back in the day, and there was a big campaign going on there, and in the Dáil, the Minister for the Environment, he launched a mandatory levy to fund the scheme for pyrite homeowners, to give certainty to them and to ensure that they wouldn't be out of pocket. That minister was Phil Hogan. That was 2012, and the scheme of 50 million was going to be part funded through a series of levies on quarrying, the banks, and some consumer products. Now, that was the first reading of the bill. The second time he came back into the Dáil, there was quite a delay then from 2012. Over a year he came back into the Dáil. He was referring to the report of the Pirate Panel of July 20 as having direct or indirect responsibility for the pirate problem, which contributes to the resolution. But he went on to say that following discussions within the parties involved in seeking to bring about a resolution, including appropriate funding arrangements, he was disappointed that it was not possible to get the parties to agree a voluntary solution, and in the absence of such agreement, he says, I sought and received government approval for the funding of a pyrite remediation scheme from the imposition of mandatory levies on the quarrying and insurance sectors. Now, the next piece is very interesting. It's just one short sentence which I'll read. Unfortunately, he says, legal difficulties arose during the drafting of the required legislation, and it was not possible to proceed on the basis of the government approval. And he adds then, while I have always said that the state is not responsible for the pyrite problem, a view supported by the report of the independent panel, it would be unacceptable to leave affected homeowners without a sustainable solution. And the sustainable solution was 100% redress.
Yeah.
And there's no ifs or buts about this. There's no point in coming out now saying that people shouldn't have built houses that big. That was no new business with the families concerned. There's no point in coming out and saying that the pirate scheme was a lot cheaper. Of course it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
I mean, water was even cheaper back then.
Yeah.
I mean,
but it's not the same issue either.
It's got nothing to do with it. But I mean, this whole issue of 100% of what has become into the lexicon of political jargon in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Because I'm being encouraged to phone certain Fianna Fáil councillors or TDs who'll fill me in more on the detail as if I didn't already flipping well know. But the reality is that the government again has been caught in the headlights here. They have failed to react as they should have done 5 years ago, especially when that primetime report came out.
Yeah. And
they're running for cover in an effort to find a solution. But the fact that numbers of the Mica Committee from Donegal, battle-hardened campaigners like the two women I've already referenced, Anne Owens and Eileen Doherty, Paddy Dover and Michael Doherty and people like that, Eamon Jackson.
Ali Farron.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of them there. Yeah. They are highly experienced, and the government knows, Dara O'Brien knows how far he can push his luck on that. If things don't work out, they'll walk off the pitch. Let us hope that they don't have to do that. And at this point, I think we'll leave that to the readers to make up their own minds on it. And we're also on Tirconaill.tribune.com, where you can see and read our podcast as well.
Yeah.
Talk to you next week.
Thanks, bye.